Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind Your Mental, a podcast that seeks to educate, empower, and uplift those seeking guidance through the monumental world of mental health. I'm your host, Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health clinician. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, everyone. So, today's episode is actually kind of sparked by a conversation I had recently. So, I was talking to someone and they were explaining to me how therapy and mental health, like psychology, all that stuff, is a joke. Now, I will tell you that one of my favorite pastimes is talking to people about like psychology and therapy and mental health before they realize that, I'm a mental health clinician. So it wasn't like they knew that like I had dedicated my whole life to this, but it really sparked conversation and it really made me think more and honestly be a little irritated at the candid opinions of this particular person. But it's not like this particular person is the first individual who has told me that they thought like mental health and therapy was like a joke and a scam and people just need to suck it up and like we should be resilient as a people. This person was black. We should be just resilient. So it's not new, but it really made me think like, I really want to talk about this on the podcast because this is something that I think is very relevant. And these are also thoughts that I think are pretty common. So what is the big deal with seeking mental help, prioritizing mental health, and getting like the care you need? Like, what's the problem? Why do so many people have an issue with this? Like, what is it? Is it that you feel like individuals are like, you out here telling your business to somebody who doesn't know you? You out here telling your business to someone who doesn't look like you? You feel like no one can possibly understand what you're going through? Like, what is it? So the specific facts that this person spouted was the fact that, one, it's a typical one, like just go to church. And I really feel as though God put individuals on this earth to help you. So, if psychology is a thing and if psychologists are a thing and counselors are a thing, then like I think God knows that. I think God's cool with you seeing these people. So that was one thing. Another thing was the fact that we should just suck it up. This person was talking specifically about the fact that, they had been through some hardships. They feel like they were able to pull themselves up and deal with it. And other people should be able to do that too. Now, there are a lot of indicators that this person was not able to just suck it up. Like, I don't know, seeming sad, constant substance use, whatever. But that's despite the fact. I don't think that's a good excuse because I think all of our problems are relative. So just because, like, for example, did you know that everyone that suffers from like an assault or a traumatic event or some kind of stressor, that doesn't mean that they're actually going to have like a mental health disorder as a result. It doesn't mean that they're going to have PTSD as a result, but some people do. So everyone's reaction to things are relative. So just because one person can have like an incredibly horrifying experience and walk away from it, that doesn't mean that the next person will be able to. So I don't really agree with comparing one person's reaction to a stressful experience to another person's reaction to a stressful experience. Another thing that I think gets in the way of individuals seeking mental help was the stigma. The stigma that is associated with going to talk to someone else. Now, I think this stigma comes from so many different places, to be honest. There's the fact that Black people as a community tend to have the whole house business stays in the house concept, that you don't really tell people your business. And I get that because I think back in the day, telling people your business could have got you, I don't know, in trouble. I think you had to stay more together and more tightly knit as a community because we were all we had. And I totally understand that. But I don't think that's the case as much. Actually, I'm not going to say that's not the case anymore. I don't think that means that you have to keep your mental health difficulties together, like keep them to yourself. because as someone who works with children and adolescents and who has worked with children who have suffered from like a traumatic event, sexual assault, neglect, domestic abuse, the whole mentality of keeping stuff to yourself is honestly what kind of fosters an environment for these kind of abuses to occur sometime, or that fosters an environment for these abuses to occur for such a long period of time, because there's this perception that if I tell on so and so I'm going to get in trouble, and then so and so is going to be mad at me, or we need to stick to ourselves and stick to our own, and that's not really safe. It's actually one of the reasons why I don't think secrets are ever safe when it comes to children, and I always state that with parents. But the stigma is another piece. Another thing is the fact that I think there's this just opinion that talking about your feelings makes you weak. I think this happens a lot within the Black community, but I don't ever think talking about your feelings makes you weak, because there's nothing more difficult, in my opinion. There's no more heavy lifting that is required than with someone who has to talk about the depths of what's going on with them, acknowledge what's happening, talk about the root of the behavior, talk about the feelings that are espoused with this behavior, and try to deal with it. Like, there's no heavier lifting than try to correct your wrongs. There's no heavier lifting than trying to work through your problems. So to me, seeing a counselor or a therapist or psychologist or whatever, that takes real strength. I think the hardest step is like walking through that door for the first time, or even actually before even walking through the door, I think it's actually making that appointment in the first place. So I think that's another misconception. I think there's a concern about like not being able to talk to people who look like you, which I get. I totally understand that, because a lot of times you don't get to see a Black clinician or a Latinx clinician or an Asian clinician. But right now, there seem to be so many different resources when it comes down to actually finding a Black clinician. Even a Latinx clinician, I think they have resources as well. Like, there's therapy for Black girls, there's therapy for Black men. Like, there's so many ways to find someone that does look for you. That's not really a valid excuse anymore. And I will say it actually can still be an excuse, because although I get wanting to talk to someone who looks like you and who can understand the stresses of the skin that you walk in, my experience as a Black female does not mean that I will totally understand your experience as a Black female. My experience as a Black person does not mean that I will totally understand your experience as a Black person in the first place. So although I get it, I think sometimes it can be seen, sometimes I see it as a cop-out, like a way to kind of get out of going to therapy, if that makes any sense. I do think unfortunately, there aren't that many Black clinicians. I think the number is growing significantly and consistently. And I don't feel like the benchmark should always be white people, although they are often the individuals we're compared to. But if you do want to compare to white people, no, there are not as many Black therapists, psychologists, counselors as white people, but there's not as many Black people as white people. So like, it's going to take some time for us to try to, come up as a group to actually be seen, like to actually go through the training process, to actually be a clinician. So I really don't want that to stop people from getting the help that you need. Like, what does that say? Like, I'm the person who gave you, like, say you have diabetes, the person that gave you your insulin, that could have been Black or white, but the medicine still works. And it's not the same exact thing with therapy, but if you're struggling with something like depression, anxiety, a trauma or stressor disorder, a phobia, what else? A personality disorder, thoughts of self-harm, seeing someone who is Black versus who is white, I get wanting to see someone who looks like you, but you also need to get the help that you need. So I don't want that to always be the reason, in a sense. Also, individuals may feel as though, what's another thing that I often hear? I'm fine. I hear I'm fine a lot when it comes to patients or families. Not actually when it comes to patients. When it comes to patients, I do hear, but I hear I'm fine a lot when it comes to, I'll work with children and then their families, of course, I'll work with them too. But then when I notice that the mom or the dad is like really struggling because their child is struggling too, I'll suggest they go seek individual care, and they're like, I'm fine. And it's like, well, the thing is, as a professional, I can tell you that you're not fine. Like, there's so many signs that you're not fine. And I think it's amazing that you're willing to get this care for your child, but everyone has heard, I think so many people have heard that you can't pour from an open cup. Open cup. You can't pour from an empty cup, or the simplistic, like, put your mask on first before you put someone else's mask on. The plane is going down and you're not even seeking help for yourself. Like, you're not okay. It's like you're always going to be selfless for your children. I think amazing parents are always selfless for their children, but then they don't take care of themselves. And it's not just about what you're doing or not doing. It's also about, like, what the child sees. They see the fact that you take care of them. That's amazing. But they also see the fact that you may not be taking care of yourself, which is a good point that I'm going to get into in the next episode with, like, the whole Black Superwoman syndrome and tough guy black male syndrome and stuff like that. But that's, like, another reason that I often hear when it comes down to it. So for individuals who think that we don't need therapy as a people, that think that Black people don't need therapy as a people, okay, let me, like, share some stats with you on this in the case, okay? So African American people, and this stat is specifically as of, what is this, as of 2016. Black people, African American, I prefer Black, but Black people are 20% more likely to report serious psychological distress than adult whites. So we have more stressors. Black people living below poverty, which is, it's a significant number of us, unfortunately, are 3 times more likely to report serious psychological distress than those living above poverty, which oftentimes are white people. Black people are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than adult whites. And then, and this is something that I really think always gets me, because I've always heard this whole, I think growing up, like, oh, Black people don't try to kill themselves. So although, Black people are less likely to die from suicide as teenagers, like, I'm speaking specifically about teenagers, Black teenagers actually attempt suicide more than white teenagers, specifically males. So it's not the fact that they aren't experiencing suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation or thoughts of self-harm. They're making more attempts. It's just they're not dying by suicide. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be the fact that, like, women are actually, they attempt to commit suicide just like men, like young men, for teenagers specifically, but they use different methods. Like, males are more likely to use more lethal force, like weapons, whereas women are more likely to use other methods such as pills and stuff like that, and they'll get found. So it's not that we are not experiencing the distress. We are. We're actually experiencing it more, but we're less likely to take care of ourselves in a sense. Like, what's the big deal? I've heard often that when it comes down to it, why talk to a professional when you can talk to a friend? So there are so many reasons why talking to a professional is different than talking to a friend. One, a therapist and a counselor and a psychologist are trained professionals. This is what they do. This is what they dedicate their life to. This is what they study. This is what they've done research for. Just to give a little, like, bit on my training, I have a bachelor's in psych. I have a master's in regular psychology. I also have a master's in clinical and medical psychology. And I just successfully defended my dissertation. So I'm a doctor and I have a PhD in medical and clinical psychology. In addition to that, before I started my 2,000 hours of training at Hopkins, I already had about 800 hours with children, adolescents in multiple places such as community mental health, hospitals, juvenile detention centers, and residential facilities. And this is all before I get my licensure exam. So if your friend has all that training when it comes to psychology, I mean, by all means, talk to your friend. But it's not the same. Like, this is what I do. And that doesn't even count, like, my research on the subject and also my publications as well when it comes to minority mental health, adolescent well-being, trauma, or the presentations I've done on the same topic. So it's not the same as talking to a friend, because licensed mental health professionals are licensed for a reason. The reason why we get our licenses is to make sure that we stay up on what we're supposed to do. Another thing is, like, we're objective. I'm objective as a future psychologist. When it comes down to it, when it comes to how I am thinking of your case and trying to conceptualize it, friends are amazing. When I'm talking to my friends, it's great, but it's also the fact that they can never 100% be objective because you're their friend. They love you. So it might be like a moment where they're like, they can be honest with you, but they can't 100% be objective. And no one can be 100% objective, but I don't have the same amount of stake in a case in that one person as your friend will. And when you're dealing with issues that might have to deal with, what if you have to talk about that friend? What if you talk about a family member? What if you're uncomfortable with talking to that person about what's going on because you haven't really acknowledged it to yourself yet? That's when a mental health clinician is like, makes more sense. Therapy is also confidential. I think most friendships, if you have a really, really good friendship and someone you've known forever, it could also be confidential in a sense. But there's that, I think, safety when you know that, like, you can't tell someone else your information. Like, even if we're subpoenaed most of the time, you don't give them like plays of the session. You just give them a general, like, oh, we talked about difficult stressors, and those stressors could have been like from A to Z, but like it's a confidential session. Like, our stuff is protected by law. That's another thing. Like, what do you think we're gonna go running and telling your business? No. Therapy also focuses on you. There's no other relationship that's gonna focus on just you. Relationships are reciprocal, like friendships, family, romantic things. Like, you have to reciprocate what's given to you. You can't have someone talk to you for like 30 minutes and then you say, oh, you can't talk to someone for like 30 minutes and be like, all right, well, I'm done here. You have to reciprocate. You also have to listen to them. When I'm in therapy, and my entire time is focused on you and what's going on with you. This has nothing to do with me. This isn't my time. This is your session. You don't have to ask how my day was. I mean, that's what's up if you do, but like, really, who cares how my day was? I'm here to talk to you about your problem. How often do you get that? You don't really get that. That's another reason why you should go to therapy. Especially anyone should go to therapy, but also Black people. How often do you get to just have someone listen to all the stresses that are going on with you? And I can only imagine there's a lot. We walk around every day in our Black skin that people think is Teflon, and it's not. We walk around every single day just trying to make it. Just trying to, some people are dealing with having to rob Peter to pay Paul, living paycheck to paycheck, trying to just come up with their own plan and their own goals, trying to make it through one microaggression after another, trying to make it through things not going exactly their way, trying to make it through just racism and stressors and the way that, like, people get told to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and they ain't even get boots in the first place. Like, that kind of stuff. Wouldn't it be amazing if you can talk to someone about that and how that's affecting you and trying to find another way to deal with it or block it out? We also, like, with therapy, don't minimize your problems. There are so many invalidating statements that get given to individuals when they try to express themselves. It doesn't happen all the time, but have you ever had a person that you're like, no matter what I go through, I'm not talking to this one person about it, because they're just going to kind of invalidate you. And they don't say, like, you suck at life and get over it. They may say stuff like, oh, well, at least it's not this. Oh, well, it could be worse. Oh, well, why can't you just ... Oh, well, maybe you should try harder. Or don't let that bother you. Don't be so sensitive. No good clinician worth their salt is going to ever say that to you. Those are invalidating statements. When has that ever made anyone feel better? Never. It will never make anyone feel better. And as trained professionals, we know not to do that. Therapy also comes with, like, clear boundaries when it comes down to it. And there's also the fact that, it's just, I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but it's not like it's something that you can't try. What's the problem with going to see a mental health clinician? What is the issue with going to see someone that could possibly help you? If you don't like it, fine. I would say when it comes to therapy, though, at least give it like 3 sessions. And if you don't like one clinician, it doesn't mean you might not like another clinician. So maybe go see someone else just in case. But what is the big deal? We always steer so far away from mental health as a Black community, because when it comes to healthcare, honestly, we don't have the best. Healthcare does not have the best relationship with Black people as a whole. But I want to tell you, like, as someone who does this podcast, as someone who has dedicated their whole life to this, I am really just trying to help people. I am really just trying to help you become your best self. Therapy is not a sign of weakness. It's just the ability, it can provide you with the opportunity to become your best self, to become your best parent, to become your best like spouse, to become your best person. And I just want you to understand that there's nothing wrong with going to therapy. We really need to get rid of this stigma. There's so many people who are coming out about the fact that therapy is okay. They have had to go to therapy. This is something that helped them in life. And there's nothing wrong with it. I guess it just gets exhausting sometimes hearing people talk down about it, because there's nothing that needs to be talked down about. There's nothing wrong with going to seek therapy. And the reason why I do really enjoy talking to people about mental health before they know that I'm involved in mental health is because I just want to see like if the opinions change like over time. Like if you think it's like with all the PSAs about mental health, with all the people coming out about mental health, about like how Jay-Z said, what did he say? Seeking mental help. I don't know why I keep saying seeking mental help. Seeing a mental health professional and having to acknowledge this issue was harder than anything he's ever had to do. I think everyone talks about going to therapy. I'm pretty sure in Michelle Obama's book she talks about it. I've seen a psychologist. I love my psychologist that I used to see. I honestly think it's a part of the job as a future psychologist to kind of go to therapy to see what the other side is like and also acknowledge some of your issues. But the same way I talked about signs and symptoms that may present themselves last episode to let you know that it's time to seek therapy, I guess I really wanted to talk more about this episode. It's okay to see a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist. You really should be. If I had my way, like public policy wise, quarterly evaluations or quarterly psych appointments would be a requirement. The same way, and they would be covered by health insurance. The same way PCP appointments are covered. If you have insurance, I think mental health appointments should be covered. But I just want to just have it out there that there's nothing wrong with seeking mental health care. You're not really helping anyone without doing it. And I think every single person in this world could benefit from seeing a mental health clinician at least once in their life. It is a truly freeing experience. And I don't think that we're in a place where we can act like this isn't a problem anymore. I don't think we're in a place where we can act like we're not struggling. Because we are. Like, so many people are struggling. And mental health deals with the body, the brain, like your spirit, your energy. It just changes everything. And we really need to acknowledge more that we need to seek mental health care. I have no shame in talking about the fact that I've sought mental health care at all. Like, sometimes it was because I just needed to check in and do like booster sessions. Sometimes it's because I was dealing with something that was so tough that I did not know how to manage it. And with me, it kind of just stuff like that manifests in the fact that like if I become too easily emotionally triggered or stuff like that, I realize that like, my nerves are on an 8 constantly. So I probably need to talk to someone so I can work on getting that down. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's worse to keep walking around possibly harming each people with like the way you lash out when you're upset and stuff like that than just getting the healthcare. Like there are so many different types of help you can get, and I just want the excuse to stop being used regarding not having a means to find someone, not being able to find someone that doesn't look like you, feeling like it's against God. You can have Jesus, Jehovah, and your psychologist. You can have the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and your counselor. You can have, he is Alpha. You can have Alpha, Omega, and you can have your therapist. It's not necessary to use that as an excuse. And oftentimes I've actually seen more churches integrating mental health care too. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it. I could understand the concern, but just like jump into that. I can honestly say there's nothing more freeing. That's kind of just what was on my mind today. Stay tuned because I have some awesome guests lined up. I'm so excited about it. But this is just the end of this episode. I'm just reminding everyone to just be kind to yourself. Give yourself a chance. Life is not the easiest thing in the world, but it's also not, I think it can also be like a magical thing. I think it's just nothing wrong with seeking help and support and getting the accommodations you need. Black people, I understand that we see things from a different angle. We want to be resilient. But resilience runs out, and I think it's important to acknowledge that it does. Like, you're gonna hit a wall. You're gonna not be able to like deal with it or pull yourself up anymore, and you need to get help when you need it. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to seek mental health care before you get to that point where you feel like you can't pull yourself up. So that's it for today's episode of Mind Your Mental. If you have issues finding mental health care, there's therapy for Black girls, there's therapy for Black men. If you have insurance, you can also call your insurance company and find someone who's closer to you. You can also look for community mental health centers that offer sliding scales or pro bono cases as well. There's also, if you have difficulty getting in to see a mental health professional, there's also Talkspace, which is a service that it seems to be less expensive than seeking mental health care. You don't need insurance to use it, and you can also it lets you talk to people online, through your screen, and also some plans offer text messaging services. There's so many different ways to do it. You can also do Google and try to find a professional. You can find a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist. There's plenty of ways to do it. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, hit subscribe so you can get every single new episode we have. We are available on Podbean, iTunes, Blueberry, basically anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. We're also episodes air every single Friday on YV Radio at 10 a.m. Thank you so much, guys, and you have a fantastic day.